Welcome to Catch You Outdoors. I'm your host, Captain Rob Modis. Contact email, catchyouutdoors@gmail.com. Website, catchyouutdoors.com. Facebook page, Catch You Outdoors. Got a couple of books available on Amazon Kindle. Bridge to Paradise, released this past November, and What I Know About Fishing Southwest Florida, released in November of 2020. Get you a copy. Today's episode, number 29, titled, So You Want to Be a Fishing Guide. A lot of thought went into this one. I'll get to that in just a minute. First, a few notes, updates. Third book is progressing. No title as of right now. Many of them on the board, though. Most likely I'll let the publisher decide what that's going to be. April weather is getting much better wind-wise, and then not so, and then it's okay again. It's almost always warm in South Florida throughout the winter, but this year the wind has been especially brutal. It does put a damper on the beach fishing and some inshore stuff as well, especially in a kayak. But hopefully things will get better. I know realistically on this coast, the wind will probably blow into May, and then all of a sudden it just turns into soupy tropical weather. So keeping my fingers crossed. I'm actually ready for summer. I'm ready to be hot again. It's okay. And now, so you want to be a fishing guide. This is a special request, actually. Just a little background. For those of you who don't know, I was a guide for years. I started my guiding career actually in the Florida Keys, working out of Miami, where I lived. Actually, I lived in Fort Lauderdale. I worked out of Miami. When I got my captain's license, my first several trips were in the Keys. I did Key Largo and then down in Islamorada in Florida Bay, all part-time. And then after moving to Fort Myers is when I got real serious about it. But anyway, I still to this day, it's been 7 years since I've been a guide, officially a guide. Cancer got me. That's a whole nother story. But I still get questions, and I still get questions from people that I fished. Most recently, I got a question from a good client who became a friend. And his son is going to be a guide. And his son fished with me when he was, barely waist high to me. I think that's the coolest thing ever. He really got infatuated with it. I mean, he loved it. He'd started doing tournament fishing at a young age and then suddenly decided he wants to be a guide. And his daddy called me up and said, we need some advice. And so, see, it still happens. And especially after you've been a long time guide, I was successful. I did a good job. I worked hard at it. And so I got to thinking about it. I've seen a couple articles over the years, and I mean, I saw one ages ago. Sanibel's got two, or had two, I'm not sure about now, but had two weekly newspapers that were available on the island, and one of them had an article titled something about, So You Want to Be a Captain, or something like that, very close to what I'm talking about here. And I read it and about died laughing. It was more tongue-in-cheek because of the trials and tribulations of actually being a guide. It's serious stuff, but I'm going to try to treat this as lightly as possible. I'll cover a lot of bases with this one. This will take every bit of the 30 minutes, no doubt about it. Basically looked at the notes that I have. But yeah, it's serious stuff. Being a guide is, in the eyes of the outsider, the people, it's glamorous. That's got to be fun. You go fishing all the time, every day. Wow, what's wrong with that? And how tough can that be? You have no idea. It's tough on the body, I can tell you that. Tough on the brain too. It really is. Being a guide is it's a full-time job. I mean, it is really, really hard, and I guess I should stop right there and say full-time versus part-time. I was a part-time guide to begin with, and a lot of people start that way. I soon discovered that that's no way to make a living. It's just strictly going to be a hobby job. And I didn't want a hobby job. I wanted a real job. I was tired of the office and didn't want to go back to the office. And the only way I could see not doing that, or any other job for that matter, retail and the other things that I've been involved in over the years, was to actually get very serious about this. I sought out a guide, a friend of a friend through Jonelle actually, and sat down with him and asked him a lot of questions. And the first thing he said is, do you have a business plan? And as a matter of fact, I did. but only because I came from the the banking business, the technology side of it. But still, I understood banking and how it worked and other finance. And yeah, so business plans. So I started with that. And that's my advice. Part time is it works for a little while, and then you suddenly realize you're just a weekend fisherman again, which means you don't have the knowledge that you need to be accurate with the fish every single time you go out. The time on water is crazy important. Being able to go out on the water almost every day makes your life so much simpler when it comes to finding fish for your clients. You also start to learn a lot about the water and about wind directions, tides, and when things happen. So you start to make a mental logbook. You start putting things away in the back of your mind so that you can refer to that again when those tough days come up. The wind was out of the north and it was blowing 15, but I caught fish here, and that stuff starts to pop back into your head, and that's what you really need. Yeah, part time's tough, really, really tough. It's tough to keep clientele that way too. And I hated fishing weekends. I'll be perfectly honest with you. That was another motivation of mine. Saturday and Sunday, everybody's out. That's the days when everybody's out. The people that you don't want running over you with jet skis and weekend warriors, and that you just don't want that. As a guide, as a profession, and remember what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about just going boating. Everybody likes to go to the sandbar. Everybody likes to hang out and drink a few beers and wave at each other and get all crazy on the water. That's great. Don't drink and drive, please. Don't drink a boat. But that's how it is. I mean, that's how it worked. Weekdays, yeah, man. Monday. Oh, I loved Monday. Everyone went back to work. Had all the water to yourself except for other guides. And when you start to be a full time guide, that gets a lot less than every other guide. There's a lot of part time guides. And by the way, I got nothing against that. There are part time guides that actually worked out really well, policemen and firemen, and I worked with both. In the Fort Myers area, there were quite a few, not so many police that I'm aware of, but there were quite a few firemen, and that's because the on-off schedule of firemen worked out real well. They would be on 24 off 48 or on 48 off 24. So they were on these shifts basically where they would actually have 2 or 3 days in a row off and then work a day or two. So that enabled them to run trips at roughly 3 to 4 days a week, just based on their schedule. And then what was great about those guys is they were local. In my case, they were local Fort Myers folks, and these guys were very knowledgeable, knew their way around, and they pulled it off. A few of them said, "I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to be a full-time guide," but whatever. And you'll be surprised how many clients will ask you that. They'll send you an email and they'll point blank, "Are you full-time or part-time?" That's like the first question. As soon as you say part-time, that puts them off and they head in another direction. And that's not always fair, but that's just the way it works. So, time on water, being able to fish on weekdays, those are all things to take into account. The most important thing to take into account is how much this is going to cost you up front. How much money you're going to have to lay out just to be a guide. It seems like a great job, right? You go fishing, you collect about $500 for a half day. I was shocked to see how high it is. When I stopped 7 years ago, the going rate was 400, but inflation. Um, $500 roughly for a half day. Some are a little more, a little. Some people are. I went online just to look and see because I had no idea, to be honest with you. Charges vary around $400 to $500, but then it's $50 per person over two, so you can just basically ballpark it at around $500. That $500 per trip is going to net you about half, about 250. And I'm being really honest about this. I know a lot of people go, "Oh, there's no way." No, it's way. Way before you get your captain's license, and way before that, you really need to take a piece of paper. This is that business plan. Draw a line down the middle of a legal page, and on one side put outgoing, and the other side going incoming, or vice versa, however your brain works. But you got money coming in on one side, which is primarily the $500, and on the outside you have all the outgoing, and there's a big long list of outgoing. And then you have to factor, how many trips a week can I honestly do when you first start? Not many. How many can I do after 3 years? Quite a few. If you're good at it, and your clientele starts coming back, it's about a 3 year span. So your first year is very lean. You want to have a rich spouse. be it male or female. Yeah, you want somebody out there, or supplemental income of some sort. There are a lot of retirees that start to be guides. That's not a bad thing. They have income coming in. A lot of retired, again, back to firemen, people, county workers that can retire at 20, 25 years, military people, Coast Guard, Navy, Army, Marine Corps, that kind of stuff, Air Force. They can retire and then they can fall back to another job. So the cost, the outlay of cost at the beginning is severe, and it's going to take a while to get it going. If you take just the income of being a guide, it'll be 3 years. At about 3 years is when you start getting your repeat business. You're in season number 3, and things start looking rosy. By 4 and 5, it gets better and better, and pretty soon you're booked every single day, 5 days a week. In season, you're booked every single day, twice a day, 2 trips, morning and afternoon trips. So the money's pretty good when you get to that point. But up until that point, you are burning cash a whole lot faster than you're making it. So you have to consider that. The reason I say the 250 reality out of $500 for a charge is, first of all, gas. Obviously, the gas prices are up now, but even without that happening, boats burn fuel way faster than automobiles do. And it's hard for a lot of people to understand that don't spend a lot of time on a boat. I mean, they may realize it when they fill it, but as an example, a back bay center console, 20 foot, 21, 22 foot, it's got a 60-gallon tank on board, typically. It can be more, a little less. And you're going to fill it up almost every time you take the boat out. Now, not 60 gallons, but you're going to put 25, 30 gallons in half a tank. You never want to let the boat go down below half. And I like going home with a full tank in the boat for maintenance reasons. Keeps the moisture down if you keep more fuel in the tank. Not apt to get condensation and stuff in the tank itself, which is bad, very bad. So anyway, let's just say, I mean, you're talking $150 to $200 in gas. Easy to put that much fuel in a boat. So let's just break it down and say, it's $100 every time you fill it up every day. So there goes $100 of your 500 right out the door. Then you have your bait and your ice. The better the cooler, the longer the ice lasts. But you may need to have that. You may need to have that that capability of putting 2 boxes on board with ice in it. Water for your clients. What else? Oh, a bait, of course. And about the cheapest you're going to go is shrimp, which is going to be about $25 to $30 a hundred, depending on where you buy it and whether you get deals or not from a certain tackle dealer or a bait shop that gets to know you. Then add to that, now that's the daily tangible stuff. The intangible is going to be tackle. You're going to go through gobs of hooks and jigs. You're going to go through gobs of leader and line and popping corks and whatever else you might use. And then you're going to burn up rods and reels like nobody's business. No matter how good the equipment is, it's guiding is brutal on equipment. I think a lot of manufacturers in a back channel way monitor what guides are doing. That's why they have pro staff. They can tell, boy, we burn that reel up in no time. We got to work on that. You have the boat expense itself. Do you have a boat payment? You got to figure that on an annual basis and take that out of your charters. You got to figure your trailer registration and your boat registration. You got to figure your fishing license. You have to have a charter fishing license, not just a regular old put it in your pocket, you go fishing license. Insurance. Oh, Lord. Got to break the insurance down. That'll be one of your most expensive things. Especially for liability insurance, you have to have that as a guide. You cannot roam around without liability insurance. And then, of course, insurance for the boat itself, boat and equipment. So you can see where I'm going with this. So the 500 is a pie in the sky number. And reality is whatever we were charging as a guide, even back when I did 400, you had to factor, after the year is over with, 50% of that is yours, roughly. You're going to pay taxes. And by the way, you better pay taxes because they'll come get you if you don't. It's generally a cash business. And it's like any other case, I'll just put a little of that aside. I wouldn't do that. I would get yourself a really good accountant who takes good care of you. By the way, accountants cost money. So you see where I'm going with this. This pie in the sky, this glamorous job of being a fishing guide sounds really, really wonderful until you actually factor in all of the outside expenses. There are people out there that go out and get their captain's license just to have a captain's license. That's cool. It's fun to be called captain. I like it. Hey, Cap. How you doing? They can remember your name that way. They don't have to remember your first name. No, you're just Cap. People in my neighborhood in Fort Lauderdale, now all the guys here, the gals here and guys here just call me Cap. Oh, that's Captain Rob. Okay, so now I'm Cap. That's kind of fun. It's nice. Nice pat on the back. You worked hard to get it. And that's what we're going to talk about next. The hardest thing is the fishing experience part. Um, well, I guess that's the hardest thing. But over time, you're going to learn more and more and more as you're on the water, obviously. But you really do need to have a good basic knowledge of where you're going to fish. In my case, Southwest Florida was really great. It was better than me fishing the Keys. I knew the Keys pretty well. I fished there quite a bit. But my home was really Southwest Florida. And so I did a whole lot better in the back bays and Gulf of Mexico. Um, but you want to really work at that. You want to make sure that you know your species. There's a lot of learning. I mean, there really is. People on board the boat are going to ask you what kind of bird is that. And you don't want to look like a dummy. So you know, is it a dolphin or a porpoise? Was that a manatee? Was that a whale? Stuff like that. I mean, it's really there's this. You're an entertainer, I guess is what I should say. Fishing is important, very important to being a guide, fishing guide, and you're going to really, really work hard at that part of it. But the reality is, you're an entertainer. You'll be on the boat for a minimum of 4 hours with people that you barely know. You're trapped. You can't just walk to the other room. You can't go look something up if they ask you a question. It has to kind of be there. Or you just have to admit you don't know. I'll get back to you and figure out what that thing was that you saw. And that does happen on the water, by the way. To this day, people catch a fish and pull it up and go, what in the world is that? Because there are so many species out there, especially in Florida waters. You're going to have to put up with all the craziness. Now, in the most cases, I will say this. In the most cases, as a guide, most fishing trips are really good. People are nice. They're happy. They're on vacation. They really want to be out on the water. They want to see the sights. They've watched fishing shows. They've seen all kinds of crazy stuff on fishing shows, and they want to be a part of that. And that's your job. You're going to show them that. You're going to show them the highlights of Florida, of the backwater areas that are beautiful. Those of you that are lucky enough to fish down in the Everglades and stuff, I mean, that's a fantastic place. We have beautiful birds. We have all kinds of crazy wildlife. So you're going to entertain them with all that mixed in with that fishing knowledge you have. It's not all about the fish. If you want to quote me on something, that is the big one for a fishing guide. It is not all about the fish. You'll soon find out that that's important, but not the most important thing for a lot of trips. Yes, they want to catch a fish. Yes, they want to be successful, but you're going to find that the majority of the people you take fishing could care less if it's a snook, a red, a trout, tarpon, whatever. That will come, no question about it, and you will have clients that want that done. They've watched too many fishing shows, but a great many of them just want tug. They just want it. They just want to feel something on the line, and that means almost anything goes. Ladyfish, jacks, catfish. Oh, God forbid. But anyway, whatever bites makes a lot of people. I can't tell you how many people took pictures of catfish they caught. I try not to have me in the picture, but that's part of the deal. Um, Raccoons on the shoreline. Oh yeah, grab the camera. Dolphins in the wake behind the boat, grab the camera. Oh yeah, I mean that's how it is. So your job as an entertainer, and you need to keep that in mind, and you need to be the most pleasant entertainer on the planet. Everything you do has to be upbeat and bright and happy, even though you may not have had a great day yesterday or you had a bad night. You still have to show up like that didn't happen. There's also the ability to know a lot of weird things. I mean, I found that worked for me as I went on. I used to call it a chameleon brain, where your brain would just turn on and do different colors. Yeah, it's the only way I can explain it. For example, I am versed in baseball, basketball, football, and hockey. The only thing I watch avidly is basketball, and that's college basketball, not pros. But I made it a point to check scores, teams, find out who's on the boat with me because you want to know what city they're from so you don't offend somebody. And basically you blend that in. There are many, many other things. People will talk about most anything on a boat in life, food, um, places they've been, vacations, where do you go, what restaurant's your favorite restaurant, that kind of stuff. Being well versed and being able to converse with people on the boat is really, really important. There's nothing worse than 4 hours of silence. And believe me, I just had a shudder just thinking about it because it happens. I mean, it absolutely does happen. So again, back to that entertainment thing. That's really what it's all about. That's what you're actually doing. The fishing, the active fishing. We'll talk a little bit about that. You're going to work very, very hard on that boat. It's going to wear you. Man, I would love to know. Back when I was fishing, you didn't have that little watch you wore that told you how many steps you took. But I'd love to know how many steps you take on a 21-foot boat during a 4-hour trip. You're a busy dude. Sitting down, don't cut it. You need to be up with your clients, working your clients, getting bait for them, netting fish when they get it, that kind of stuff. You need to be active on board the boat. People appreciate that. I would cast for customers, but try to avoid it. I certainly would not fish for them. People paid the money to be on the boat to go fishing, not for you to go fishing and hand them a rod. I know that happens because I heard it from my clients, and I thought, wow, that's bizarre. However, get somebody on the boat and you're working mangrove and you're trying to get them on a red or a snook, something that requires a very accurate cast. There are times, I'll let them do it and they'll be stuck in the bushes 5 times. And then finally they'll look at me and go, can you? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Make the cast, hand it to them. Don't hold on to the rod. And also explain to them what you're doing to make the accurate cast. Be that teacher. Say, look, this is how I get it in close. And let them work at that. And it's okay if they make mistakes. That's where that expense comes in of replacing leaders and hooks. And I'm just kidding. No, I'm not kidding. Actually, it's the truth. So you're not only are you an entertainer, you're an instructor. Last but not least, you're a babysitter. I yeah, it's gonna happen and it's okay. No, seriously, it's okay. Mom and dad bring kids. All right, dad brings son or daughter. Um, you've got children on board who want to fish, and man, do they love to fish. So you are now the caretaker of the children. Obviously, dad or mom should be the disciplinarian, and you shouldn't have to do that. But your job is basically to help those kids catch fish. And I used to make it clear to dad when he brought son or daughter or both with him. Okay, look, this is their trip. You understand? I'm going to take care of them. You're kind of on your own. You might need to bait your hook. You might need to net your own fish. You might need to take care. I mean, I'll untangle and do the things that need to be done, but I'm going to focus on your kids to make sure they have a good time. And a lot of times, dad or mom would be, ooh, it's like a relief. They actually get to fish, which when they take their kids out, they know how much work it is. So at times you'll be, quote, a babysitter. So that's the glamorous guide. Okay. Now, you're really serious about this and you really want to get this done, you're going to need a thing called a captain's license. And this is where it gets even more expensive. So you want to be a fishing guide. Okay. Part time or full time doesn't make any difference what you want to do. If you collect money on a boat, this can be for fishing, shelling, sightseeing, whatever. If you're going to take money for a boat trip, you must have a captain's license in the state of Florida. You can have a nearshore license for saltwater people, and you can have an inshore license for freshwater. Those two, by the way, don't mix. You'll need an endorsement in both cases if you fish lakes and ponds and things like that. And then you decide you're going to not do the bass, you're going to go do some saltwater. You'll have to be covered in both cases. So your coastal angler is coastal license is pretty much what's used for fishing guides in Florida in saltwater. The license is called an OUPV, which is an operator of an uninspected vessel. What that means is, it means the vessel you're using is what you're going to use to go fishing. The Coast Guard does not need to inspect that vessel. They have, however, fairly high criteria on what needs to be on that vessel while you fish. And they also won't allow you to have more than 6 passengers. That's why it's called a 6-pack license. You'll hear that quite often. What have you got? I got a 6-packer. That means you can take up to 6 people. There's some, okay, so you're going to go fishing. Most guides on a 21-foot boat prefer 2. So you're overdoing it, but that's just the way it works. There's no such thing as a 2-person, 4-person, whatever. It's a 6-person license. And here's the funny thing. The fishing license that you can get, your charter fishing license covers up to 4. Now, you can buy a 10-person license. It's much more expensive, but you can't take 10. I know, it's just one of those weird things. So typically the max people you can fish on your boat's 4 anyway, with that particular license. If you can get the 10 license and fish 6 on the boat, that's fine. Whatever you might want to do. And by the way, that's another expense. So the OUPV, or operator of an unexpected passenger vessel, or the six pack, you'll need to go to school to get that license. And in the state of Florida, the one I went to is called Sea School. It's over in Fort Lauderdale. It's here where I live, actually. That's where I got the license. Sea School is probably one of the best known. It's one of the largest in the country. They not only do the basic license, they do everything. They do license for people that work on ships, people that work on cruise ships. They do high-end captain stuff. They do towing, sailing, you name it, they do it all. So whatever you might need to perform your job on water for money, for pay, you'd be able to get through Sea School. And there is one here in Fort Lauderdale. I'm not sure about the other locations, to be perfectly honest with you. I'd have to go online and look. I did look up the cost. To the OUPV is $675. I think they do. I know they do it on weekends, so it's like Saturday, Sunday, all day, and then Friday evening. I think it's Friday evening, and then all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and you have to do that for so many weeks. I don't know, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 12, whatever it is. You have to have a certain amount of hours in class before you can even take the test. The requirements for the license are this: 18 years of age, 360 days of underway boating experience after your 16th birthday, 90 days of these days in the last 3 years. So you can see that at 18 years of age, you're going to have to be a busy dude. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know many 18-year-old guys. I know some 20-year-old guys, but I don't know too many 18s. But there you go. You must have a physical and pass it, obviously. You must have drug screen test, and you'll have random testing, by the way, because it's the U.S. Coast Guard. Current CPR and first aid testing, or instruction and test. And then a thing called a TWIC card. I don't remember what TWIC stands for, but it's a transit worker. It has to do with getting into ports. You must have port entry card on your person, even if you don't enter major ports. For example, major port would be here in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, up the coast at Cape Canaveral area, and then on the other side, Punta Gorda, I guess north of Punta Gorda. They're at Tampa, of course. Now, even if you fish in an area that doesn't have that, you still are required to hold the TWIC card. It's a government clearance card. It's a security clearance card. You'll have to have successful completion of a comprehensive exam of the USCG. Oh, that's a fun one. Or a certificate of completion of Sea School's 54-hour approved course and exam in lieu of going to the Coast Guard to take the exam. Now, that's a key element in going to schools. If you decide you're going to go to Sea School, they teach you what you need to know. Basically, what they did years ago is they went to the Coast Guard and said, look, we can handle these tests for you and make it a lot easier than people taking up your time that don't even qualify. We will qualify these folks before they start, and then we will tell them what they really need to know for their job. So in other words, the regular Coast Guard test is mind-boggling because it has everything in it, not just the portion that you want to know. And if you're going to be a six-pack guide in a small boat in backwater, why in the world do you need loading weights for a ship, which is on the test, the big test? You don't. So what they've done is they've scaled everything back and said, this is what you really need to know. Here are your courses, and here are what your tests are going to be. And I believe when I took tests, I think there were 5 of them. There may be 5 or 6 or 7 tests, but you have to, there's seamanship, there's first aid, there's firefighting, there's navigation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these different tests that you have to do, and you have to score very high on those tests. This is not like they aren't graded on a curve. 70 and 80 won't cut it. Most of the tests require a score of 90 or above, so you really have to be on the ball when that, as far as that's concerned. So you're doing their course, you're taking their test, and that test is acceptable to the USCG if you pass. Okay, plain and simple. Test fees are not included in the $675 to go to the course. Additional materials that are required. I made a cute little list of this because I remember this stuff. Parallel ruler, dividers, a TSD wheel, a calculator. If you don't know what a TSD wheel, a divider, or a parallel ruler is, you probably should seek another job. That's basic navigation on board a boat, all right? Yeah, I know GPSs are real popular, but that ain't what they're going to teach you. They're going to teach you actually how to do time, speed, distance, setting for drift, setting for wind, that kind of stuff. You need to know that stuff. If all the stuff breaks on your boat and doesn't work, you need to have a general knowledge of how to get home without a piece of electronics. So anyway, oh here, I just saw this in my notes. 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Friday, and oh, I'm sorry, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Friday through Sunday with 2 consecutive weekends. So 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Friday through Sunday, 2 consecutive weekends. So 6 days altogether, getting your 50 something hours in that you need. So there you go. I mean, that's the basics just to get the captain's license. If you want to take more than 6 passengers, or you want to do like I worked on the boats, I worked on big boats, multi-passenger boats. I was a captain of a what do you call those things? A sightseeing boat, a dolphin boat, sunset boats, things like that. That requires a master's license, a minimum for whatever size boat you're going to work. It's either a 25 ton, 50 ton, or 100 ton. I went and got my 25 ton. That's all I needed. And then as you spend time on water, they will automatically upgrade you at your next license upgrade. So I wound up with a 100 ton by the time I was finished with it, which was well over what I needed. You can take the master license as soon as you finish the OUPV license. The master license requires another 360 days on top, so 720 total days on water. That includes the 360 you included in your 6-pack license. And all that has to be done within the last 3 years. So it's complicated at best. You'll need more than that if you want to you get a towing certificate and work for one of the tow services. If you're going to work sailboats of any kind, whether it's charter sailing or being a charter captain on a sailboat, you'll need a sailing endorsement. So there's there's tons of these endorsements out there. The near coastal will cover you up to, if I'm not mistaken, 100 miles from shore. So, for example, if you get a near coastal here in Fort Lauderdale and you want to fish somebody all the way to the Bahamas, you can do that because the Bahamas are only 50 miles out. If you're going to fish on the West Coast and you're going out to a deep water reef and you're going to go further than 100 miles, which that would be an unbelievable trip. I know people have done that. You actually need your license won't cover beyond the 100 miles if you go beyond that mileage out there. So a lot of this has to be taken into account. I should mention for you folks that are seriously interested in this, there is a captain's school. It is called Captain's School in Cape Coral and Naples, Florida, on the West Coast. So I believe they have the same requirements there. I know their fees a little higher. They're $750 for their course, but they pretty much do exactly the same thing. It's a long weekend. Matter of fact, I had my license renewed by them, which is a great. Never ever try to renew your own license. When your 5 years are up on your license, almost about a year before the time is up. So in your 5th year, I guess, no, in your 4th year, as you're going toward year 5, you have to start putting all your stuff together. You got to go get re-physical. The drug test stuff has to be all in order. The physical and eye exam is the hardest part. You got to get all that out of the way. And the people at Sea School and at Captain School both know the absolute requirements you have to have before you turn your paperwork back in. That's something else about Sea School that's important, is that when you get all finished doing everything you need to do and taking all your courses, they also tell you exactly what needs to go in the package to the Coast Guard to help you get your license. Because once you get all done with all that crazy nonsense, then it goes to the Coast Guard for review. And then eventually your license shows up in the mail, which, by the way, is probably one of the happiest moments of my life. And I've talked to other people that have gotten captain's licenses. It must be like getting a pilot's license. That thing comes in the mailbox and you are so high. It's just like, oh my, you look at it and you look at it again and you go, because it's an accomplishment. I'm not kidding you. It took and takes a lot of work for that thing to show up in the mailbox. And you learn to cherish it. The reason I say that, you do not want to lose it. If you get busted for drugs, if you get busted for anything, there's a good chance the Coast Guard is going to pull your ticket. And you do not want that to happen, because eventually they'll let you have it back. It may take a year, might take a 2 of probation. But guess what? They don't just give it back to you. You got to go back to Sea School. You got to start the whole thing over again to prove that you're worthy. And believe you me, after you make it through the first time, you pretty much make up your mind that you never, ever want that to happen. last but not least, the expense of actually running the boat as a captain. You're required to have special life jackets that are expensive. You can't just use the standard orange jackets that you buy at the store. These things are, the jackets run about $80 a piece, maybe a little more. And they're by the Coast Guard for the Coast Guard kind of thing. Reflective tape has to be a certain way on the jackets. That costs money. And then obviously, you got to be a member of the drug testing consortium where you're going to get randomly tested. You pay for that every year. You're going to have to go back and get your first aid done every couple of years. The TWIC card, by the way, is only once. That's kind of nice to know. Your medical papers have got to be kept in order. Your eye exam and your testing has to be kept in order. So you're basically constantly on the ball with all this stuff, because at the end of the 5 years, you're going to have to do this whole thing again. You have to renew your license, and it's going to require a lot more paperwork. So you want to be a fishing guide. Yeah, I hope you do. I hope to goodness you take this to heart, that if you really want to do this, I want to impress upon people that are listening to this, that have asked me this question a zillion times, that it's important that you understand the work that goes into this. So the next time you get on a boat with a licensed captain, you can fully appreciate what that person did to get there. And on that note, don't be afraid to ask for a license. There are a lot of fly-by-nighters. You got to be careful, especially during seasons. And that depends on where you live. If you're up in the north, the seasons are summertime. Down here in Florida, it's in the winter. There are a lot of people that show up with a boat and fishing gear and go, I can take you fishing, and I'll do it for $350. It's probably the first sign right there that something might not be right. But you really need to ask for credentials. You really should, just to protect yourself. That if the person's got credentials, that means that they most likely have everything else that they need, and you can ask for that too. Liability insurance and all the other things that go with being on the water or taking people on the water. It's a high responsibility. The Coast Guard takes this very seriously, and if you decide you want your captain's license, you probably should too. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate taking the time to tune in. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend and share it on social media. Catch You Outdoors, hosted by Anchor, available via Spotify and Apple Podcast. Our Facebook page is Catch You Outdoors. Our website's catchyoutdoors.com. Until next time, get outdoors and enjoy.